I am super excited to be leading this discussion today with our panel on data-driven release strategies. Get excited, data is a hot topic. I am joined today, as you can see, by an incredible panelist lineup. All of these folks bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the topic of data. And I also feel like we have a really good mix of background on this panel. So folks who come from label services, distribution services, and technologies that are analyzing and optimizing data. So our goal today, right, data-driven release strategies, is going to be to talk about different ways that labels are using data to effectively tailor their marketing campaigns and strategies. Hopefully we'll go over some best practices, some tips, some tricks that have helped us find success in recent campaigns. I'm sure we will have questions in this panel, so I'll be mindful to leave some time at the end for us to run through any questions. Let's start by introducing you to our amazing panel. Christina, maybe we start with you.
Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Christina Stevison. I am a co-founder and head of marketing and operations for Connect Music based out of Memphis, Tennessee. We're a digital streaming provider, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt Sawin, the general manager of Virgin Music Label and Artist Services. So we are a distribution company, global distribution company, plus artist services agency, providing artists a non-traditional label format, if you will.
Hello everyone, my name is Paola Marinone and I'm co-founder and CEO of BuzzMyVideos. I originally come from YouTube, and when we started with BuzzMyVideos, we created a technology to scale audiences and revenue on and from YouTube. Anything YouTube related, technology, that's us. And it's great to see that a lot of data geeks here. I thought I was one of the few, not really. Data is sexy again.
I'm definitely in your camp. My name is Kristin. I'm the founder of Westcott Multimedia. We're an automated advertising platform for catalog music and frontline releases. We monitor real-time stream data and organic events like viral TikTok videos, sync placements, the fact that it's Christmas, and automatically place ad buys on social media across any artist in a label's catalog.
Cool, thanks you guys. We wanted to sort of see who we have in the audience today. So maybe with a show of hands, how many people would identify as an artist? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have artists in the room, and then label. Okay, cool, that's what I figured. Okay, so let's get into it. Data. We're gonna figure out everything today in this panel, anything data related. Every time I say data, I feel like that's sort of like a pretty heavy word, right? Like everyone's always like, data. There's so much we could talk about. But to be honest, that's why I love data. And I feel like you guys would probably agree. Like there is so much to this topic. So I feel like a number of different avenues that we could take this conversation. But personally, I feel like in the past 5 or 6 years, data transparency has really opened up within the industry, right? So labels and artists have direct access to their metrics, and the majority of the time we can access that from our cell phones, right? So streaming numbers, physical sales, radio airplay, social media numbers, smart link metrics, all of those data sources are available to us, and it's sort of our job to read the data, analyze it, and put it into action. So we're gonna talk about some tricks and tips and best practices that we have to do that. So I want to start by just posing this question to our panelists. What is the value of digital data today, and how is it changing the narrative of how we market music to fans? We're starting off really hard.
All right, well, I can jump in there. So your question is, how has the narrative changed over time with just the emergence of a ton of data across social media, streaming, metadata, and how is it changing and informing how we market artists, marketing releases? In so many ways, I think if we compare it to the world of CDs, where marketing strategies were solely on frontline, you kind of lived with a plan of what was going to happen. You could plan in advance. Now, because consumption is completely democratized, digital distribution is completely democratized, the market is open. So now everything is momentary, everything is reactionary, and you need data as a map to understand what is happening in real time and what are all the marketing actions that are causing all of these organic events to take place, whether it's because the label's leaning in or it's just completely organic. So data can allow us to identify who these audiences are. They can allow us to identify audiences in specific markets. A hip hop audience in Germany can look different than a hip hop audience in Toronto. They have different values, appreciations of things. They consume music differently. So understanding audiences is huge. And then understanding a series of marketing actions and what causes different artists to break in different markets, depending if they're jazz or hip hop or metal. So I think it really at large allows you to understand and create context and then better target and better kind of formulate the actions that you're going to take, increasing the likelihood of that audience responding.
I think to kind of go on top of that, because that was perfect, and kind of give everyone the North Star that at least I live by, I think a lot of other people live by too, is that engagement equals consumption. And this entire game is about consumption, because now we live not in a transactional world, but in a vying for people's time world, right? You only have so much time in the day to consume. So as we go through and study and monitor the engagement that is happening, which then drives consumption, we want to peel back that onion and look at why that engagement happened and try to find more ways to amplify it or continue to engage on it. And I think kind of an umbrella answer to the value of data, I mean, it's completely, you can't put a number on it, right? Like it's a necessity in today's world. The problem is it's all consuming, it's suffocating, right? You can't function with the amount of data that's out there. So you have to be very smart about the data that you're looking at, how you're looking at it, and or the people that are around you, how you package it and surface it to the members of your teams. So that way you can move faster, because the data is only as good as you're able, to react to it. So that's what I got.
Yeah, if I can just add one point on what he's saying, which is definitely true, is that like actionable data is really where we are moving towards. Because while data are available right now, like they weren't so much 20 years ago, it's very important to know how to take action on those. That's one thing. And the other thing is that taking action is important because we now can, especially with social media, is all about testing and trial and error, really. So there are golden rules, but the reality is you need to really do trial and error, because you are really talking to most probably a global audience, even if you're thinking that your audience is in one place and has that loud to a certain genre and that demographic. The chances that you're wrong are pretty high, even if you know what you're doing, because you're missing out on a way bigger pie, which might be in Japan or might be in Brazil. So you really need to try different things and see if they stick, and then read the data. And that's the key thing. So doing really small tests here and there on social media will really open different opportunities that you could never think of 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and then scale it. It's all about really just trial and error, and then actionable data, and then scale it. And that's where I see that the value of data is really today.
Cool. Matt, you sort of touched on this, but just talking about like the volume of data available. Sometimes it's overwhelming, right? Like it's Spotify for artists, it's Apple for artists, it's SoundScan numbers, it's radio reports with airplay, it's feature FM link engagement. So are there specific techniques or tools that you guys use to help sort of like focus in on key data sources so you're not sort of overwhelmed by all of these numbers that you can't contextualize?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody in the room depending on what your role is. if you're one manager with 3 artists, or you're one artist looking out for yourself, or you're a label with a roster of 20, or you're a distribution company with a roster of 200, you have to come at it from different angles. It is definitely a lot easier to kind of tap into all those different, sources or funnels of data individually if you are just focused on, you as an artist, or your roster as a label. We manage insights, and we react to records across a roster of hundreds of artists. And so at the end of the day, the service that we provide, our labels and our artist clients, is trying to be ahead of the curve on their behalf, right? But we can't go every morning and wake up and go to SFA or Chartmetric or this, that, or the other thing one by one across the roster. So we had to find different ways to funnel all of the data into reactor reports, right? Very simply put, kind of pinpoint a couple, 2, 3 KPIs that at least give us indicators every time when we wake up in the morning to say, this artist has, or this song specifically has, the possibility of having a reactive moment. Then you kind of dive deeper, and it makes it a lot easier to manage.
I was just going to say that's really one of the challenges that we're trying to solve. So on Westcott, if you toggle an artist's ads on and you just go to your label page, you'll see notifications across all artists on your catalog. And it'll say, on this date, this artist saw a spike in streaming from males 25 to 34 in Hockenheim, Germany. As a result of being placed on this playlist, Westcott spent $25. Projected outcome is a 10% uptick in streams. And so we look at it as like access to that data, visualization of that data, identifying trends and patterns, and then taking action on it. Because across, the average 10-person label can have up to 500 tracks, and you can't monitor all of those tracks all the time. And so we try to stay ahead of the curve as well in that way.
Yeah, and do you want to take it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I kind of have a different perspective, because for me, I come from the world of corporate marketing where everything is kind of all nice in a pretty bucket for you. And in this space, I've had to work with my team and have different outside voices to look at all different forms of data and how do we get smarter at reacting to things, because you touched on it early, where it really teaches us the ability to get smarter about how we respond to viral moments. So that way, when they present opportunity again, of course, we're looking at the streaming data, but we're also looking at consumer engagement across different platforms, because at the end of the day, for us, it's really important to understand, why are people flocking to an artist? Because sometimes it's easier to explain not just the what, but the how and the why behind it. And I have learned in the time being that tells you so much and can provide guiding for, deciding if you need to pivot from something, or, hey, that's great. It's everywhere. Let's jump on it. And then let's, amplify that moment across different social channels and what makes sense. So it definitely makes you smarter for the team.
Yeah, if I can just add on one thing, and that's as well, there's a problem we are trying to solve. And when I was at YouTube originally, and we were like totally data geeks, and we were like on analytics all day long, and you probably are as well. But the key thing is always about, the key question we were getting from creators when we were managing the partnership program was like, okay, how can I do better? And the question is still there, to be honest. So, okay, you see all the data, and there are a lot of data that are very important for a release, or like there's, if you dig down, like you could spend there forever, like time, and there are very, very useful data. Like I've seen, for example, we are probably going to touch on that later, but like touring data and dates defined by data of geographies on the YouTube analytics, which sound very weird, but if you think to start a tour in New York, but then you start in Utah, because most of the views are coming from Utah, and then people are going to love it in Utah, so it's going to just start like a snowball effect, because you're starting there and then going to Colorado and then going to, like in a odd way, like kind of the whole touring. And I've seen that from big stars doing that, like back in the days. But the key thing is there that I wanted to mention about the data there is, how can you do better? And when we created the technology, it was really about that. It was about, okay, now let's talk about practicality. It was like, okay, just nice, the data are important. Then what do I do with it? And that's why we really think that not just what we are doing, but in general, it's about actionable data. Okay, you see the data. What do you do? And then next, how do you do it? And I think that's going to be like even more like in the coming years, because otherwise you just too many data, and it's about, okay, you get the signals, but you really need to take action at the end.
Yeah. Going off of that actionable data, are there certain trends that you're looking for when you're reading the data? Like, are there certain things that are sort of like a aha moment and like lead you to be reactionary to the data? Or are you waiting until something like goes viral and something goes off before you react?
I mean, I think it, again, is dependent on what your role is, right? But considering there's a lot of labels in the room, and probably considering everybody has access to some artists, Spotify for artists, right? You know, I think this world we're living in now is the democratization of music, right? And the balance of what is important to the gatekeepers. You know, what our partners out there, Spotify, Apple, you know, name all 200 of them, or the big five, right? They're all looking for the same thing. They're all looking for, you know, this balance of driving editorial discovery and, you know, that engagement that we talked about. And, you know, I think probably the most important thing that we're reacting to, right, or trying to drive, is the foundational artist development within these streaming services. And probably the easiest way to monitor that within Spotify for artists, since it's just a common denominator for everyone, is to really look at the editorial share versus the library share versus the search share, and start to get a handle on what is normal, right? Or what is, you know, more reactive than less reactive. You know, we have sort of our barometers, right? I don't think Spotify for artists necessarily gives you that barometer, but I think simply put is, if you're looking at something where you have 85% streams from editorial, well, Spotify's driving the ball. Your audience is not driving the ball. If the inverse is, you know, 15% editorial, or, you know, increase from streams and a lot of saves, and your streams continue to go up, then you know your artist development is working, right? So that's kind of our foundation baseline.
So for us, we have an in-house tool. We're looking at, you know, high, mid, low, because again, as a distributor, we don't make money unless our partners do. So that's the basis for everything that we do. But then, as we are not in the business of developing artists, but we are in the business of thinking about them and then growing their audience. And so how do we think about, you know, who they are, the stories that we're telling, and then what really resonates with their audiences based to drive our marketing strategies for them. So
I think originally for us, how we were identifying spike opportunities is we would, you know, take on a label and then break up the artists into stages based on Spotify followers, kind of taking from Next Big Sound's approach. And so, you know, a developing artist has under 50,000 Spotify followers, and a stage one artist has above 10 million. And so based on that stage, we would look at the rate of streams over a rolling average, looking at comparison periods. And that the threshold that it would have to reach in order for us to automatically place an ad buy would be different for a developing artist than it would a stage one artist. Now we're constantly optimizing how we're identifying spike opportunities, and they're always off the back of events, whether that's completely organic or something pushed by and constructed by the label in that moment. But now we're kind of projecting and predicting what the stream performance is going to be for each individual artist, and then creating confidence thresholds. And if it hits above the confidence threshold, then we'll kind of make automated ad buys. And there's a variety of ways of doing it, but that's kind of one of the ways that we do it. And the benefit to that is each artist or each track is different, has a different personality. So that's kind of our approach to it.
Well, as for YouTube, in the way it works as a search engine, there are two types of of strategies that are always working very well. One is proactive and one is reactive. So proactively, like you can have like templating events and you can just curate the content, even just through playlisting really. And like on tentpoling some events that are already happening that are important for the artist, or like an anniversary of the launch of an album, or it could be whatever, like the events that could be important and meaningful for the fan base. But then there are tools as well, like Google Trends or YouTube Trends, that might be known for everybody, but not everybody's really using them. And because it's a search engine, then if you see a trend coming up, and most of the YouTube creators, like not just the artists and the record labels, they're really leveraging that like massively. And if you do that, of course it needs to be like in line what you are doing, but there are like topics for every single kind of imagination, let's put it this way. So it's really about making sure you leverage those topics, because then you get really like such push that if you don't get it, it's a missed opportunity. And that means that you're reactively just leveraging something that you already have, but by using those data that are currently available for everybody, you could really give it a push to an artist, and by just leveraging the data and taking very small actions on it.
Cool. I'm curious how you guys like start a campaign, right? So like you look at data, and then how do you use it to influence your campaigns? Do you start by auditing a current artist audience? What if you're working with a new artist that doesn't really have a lot of metrics yet? Like how do you start a campaign using data to influence sort of the rest of the project?
So for us, we have 3 tiers. So to your point, if it's an artist starting out, they're not going to have a lot of streaming data that we can pull from, but then we can look at their engagement on socials, because I always say in this digital landscape, you can't win unless you are interacting with your audience. Unless you're one of those superstar artists like a Frank Ocean, where you can come out and not say anything for years. You have a built-in audience that's into you. But most artists have to, what we've said earlier, work to continue to be in front of people, whether that's an audience that they already have or getting in front of other fans for lookalike audiences. So the engagement there is really important. I think for someone kind of in that mid-tier, beyond engagement, okay, you might have some streaming numbers. Are they consistent? If we're able to look at, what we're trying to do budget-wise, does it fit? Does it make sense? Are we shooting for the moon? Can we realistically hit, the numbers that we're trying to hit, as we look at the high, mid, low, for us and the streaming projections? And then someone that's out of there, a legacy artist, that's a different, you're looking at both. You're looking at the streaming numbers, you're looking at engagement, you're looking at the metrics across the board. So I just think it depends on where the artist is in their career, and then the nature of their fan base, and you'd have to take it from there.
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit. I mean, you don't have anything to study until you have content out there, you know? So if you're starting from day one, right, and you're just building a very early following, most of the time you're spending time teasing music. Mm-hmm. I mean, we went, I think, 25 minutes without saying TikTok, but that obviously has proven itself as a great testing ground, right? And I think that's given, day one artists of today an advantage that artists didn't have yesterday. Not that they weren't doing a lot of the same things, it just makes it easier. And so whether it's that day one start or, your second start or your third start, there absolutely is, the concept of quote unquote always on. And the idea of that is that we are constantly fighting for your attention in this ADD culture, that if we rise to this mountain of audience and we sit on our heels for even a minute, and that audience falls into a valley, you got to climb right back up to that peak of audience again. So you have to find many ways to chop and deliver and spread out and syndicate your content and be everywhere in this most complicated landscape that we're in.
I think that's a great point. For us, we'll pull in real-time streaming data from the label's digital distributor, and when there's a spike, we will pull out kind of the most engaged audiences, and then those will be the audiences that we target. And we'll also, look at similar artists to use and interests, because we find that really helps find similar audiences. So that's kind of how we go about it.
Well, I guess it really depends if you're a record label or an artist. If you're an artist on your own, it's a bit more complicated because the amount of data you have are not as much. If you're a record label instead, what you can see, especially for new up-and-coming artists, is really about data that you already have, like across the board. Because there are a lot of similarities, even if the artists are not similar, but still there's so much data there that you can really leverage to understand what could possibly be. So that doesn't mean that it's going to be the way you think it's going to be, but it really helps a lot because you have a full visibility of many different artists, different demographics. And then what I've seen working very well is especially when you leverage those demographics and those type of genre that could match with different artists, that even if they're not really the same, the audience might actually like that type of content. And to give you an example, like in practical terms, like what we have been doing like a while ago, it was about, for example, there was an event, there was a concert of country music. And so we decided to promote through different channels that were about country music. So we promoted like across thousands of videos. It was roughly 100 channels towards the same event. So it was like promoting organically everywhere. So even if the artist was or was not there at the event, it was still like something that the audience would possibly listen to. So they could be interested. And then, so basically promoting the event and then promoting after the event was live, then promoting the watching the events on demand. And that was working magically because the key thing is the audience is in love with an artist, but might love other artists. So it's not just like a one way only. So it might like more. And so you get, and usually people like to discover new artists. So it's really about leveraging those data and opening up and collaborate with different channels and different artists and trying to actually push new artists through that too, because that's the best way to actually get the artists seen if they're not as known. So from a record label point of view, there is a lot that could be done from the data and that you have, especially demographic and genre and a lot of more like specific data that are there.
And I'll add, I'll add one more thing about that because we run into a situation because when we speak about collaborations, because what happens when you have an artist that doesn't fit into any of the buckets that you would traditionally look for, you know, from marketing, demographic or psychographics, you know, how do I explain, you know, hey, it's an artist and it might be that he just went to jail or, you know, it's hard to really wrap that up in a bow, you know, when you start trying to think about a marketing campaign and you have vendors around it. And so for us, you know, not even just artist collaborations, but what brands, what partnerships can we look to explore? And then they have data that we can kind of rely on and use that to guide and make decisions about how we approach a marketing campaign. So we found great success in that, either with brand and influencer collaborations that we can build and take, you know, action from there.
Kristin, in your world with working with labels and depending on how they collect their data within the privacy rules, like how much look-alike audience can you create when you're advertising for a new artist in that label?
So it's actually a big thing that we're focusing on right now. At the moment, we don't collect any first party or any PII information into the platform. We are doing a lot of work into similar artists and identifying audiences and doing cohort analytics based on the data that we get from streaming, as well as like chart metric information and other external data sources, and identifying patterns across weather data and all of that. But we are actually looking into doing potentially integrating PII information in the future. However, it's a complicated
Very
landscape.
complicated,
Yeah.
Cool. Are there specific metrics that you guys prioritize over others? I mean, I feel like we've said streaming data a lot. Is that sort of the one that we hang our hat on the most? Is streaming specific, or are there other data sources that you're looking at on a regular basis?
So I think it's really important to dive into the type of streaming data.
Right.
So insightful streaming data and actionable streaming data are two very different things. I'd argue to say that Apple Music Connect, Spotify for Artists is insightful, and that is because you get a download of two columns, like the total streams that happened in a day and the date, and then two tables of top audiences and top regions. What is really actionable is the need to have access to stream transaction information row by row, and then alongside each individual stream transaction, males 25 to 34, because that allows you to break it up in a way where you can be hyper targeted. And it doesn't have to be automated ads, it can be manual ads, it can be taking that information and going to an individual brand in that market and say, hey, we have a ton of audience that's similar to your audience, we can expand if we do something together. Or it can be, you can use that information to suggest an artist collaboration or a feature with a larger artist if it would expand their market. So I think that there's a lot of breadth of opportunities if you get that granular information, and it's accessible through your digital distributor. If you're a Merlin member, it can also be accessible through different API data feeds directly from the DSP, like the Spotify bulk API and such.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that end, there is a lot of rich, like super lean forward data that is the most reactionary that we see as like the positive signs. For like an example, Shazam is probably the most, lean forward engagement you can have from a data perspective. I heard that song, I want to know what it is, right? And they tag it. Plays from search in Spotify is even more powerful. I just heard you talking about that song. I went to my Spotify, I searched it specifically, and I hit play from there. So, depending on when and where you're in your campaign, when and where you're in certain demographics or in certain geographical regions, it's really, it's really encouraging to lean in on those particular data sets, market by market.
Cool. All right. Before we open it up to questions, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of like future telling, tell the future a little bit. What do you think the next metrics that will become significant points of focus, like what will those be in the next 5 years? What will we be talking about in a data panel in 5 years?
Revenue. Or probably even now.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I think it's going to be more, the data point will be the action that was taken as a result of that data. I think there's going to be a number of, just in general, third-party services and that are able to take this information, take action on it, and then tell the label what was the result.
Yeah, almost like track the engagement.
Yeah, and then also to your point, I think that was actually a great answer, is revenue data. Because there's a huge lag with revenue data. It's like 3 months, 6 months, and that's a really big indicator of attribution. If you're able to look at how much you're spending adjacent to streams, adjacent to revenue, those are 3 data points that can allow you to at least track the baseline of return over time, whether that's a year or 2 years. And so I think revenue is actually a fantastic answer to that question.
Well, and if I might just add something, because I was joking but not joking. No, the thing is that, like, definitely now data are going to be even more available, and there are going to be more platforms and more data even. And the key thing are going to be like just getting them all together, and then there's going to be as well more history so that you can predict, because you can't forecast basically anything because there are not enough data to predict what's going to be like. Okay, you're going to launch this, and then you're expecting that launch is going to get to that number, and that's going to get to like an audience and then revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So it's never going to be like a scientific experiment, but with a lot of historical data, then you can actually create like models that actually can give you an idea of what's going on. And I think that will need a few years from now, because still there are not enough experiences from all the platforms and no availability of everything from all the platforms that goes to that direction yet.
To play off the revenue tip a little bit, because it is important in terms of segmenting your audiences, the thing we definitely have to get better at is, not only segmenting our audiences from geo and demo in terms of media buys and stuff like that, but actually identifying them from a super fan and a regular fan and a casual fan perspective. Because the truth is that, 90% of your revenue will come from 10% of your fans, and those are your super fans, and you need to know who they are. You need to speak to them differently and offer them different things.
Cool. Are we ready for questions? Okay, we'll open it up to questions. I just ask that you wait for the microphone to be brought to you before you ask the question. Any questions?
I don't think so.
Question is, I know in the past, we've let artists kind of pick the single, and we've rolled with those songs for a while, based on the passion the artist has in that song. How long, especially in the new campaign, how long do you push a single without data before you tell that artist to move on to the next?
Without data? I don't know if I would ever do that. But, yes, there is sort of the art of all the cooks in the kitchen, including the artist, of deciding what songs go out in what order. Oftentimes we'll think about, the longevity of the pre-release campaign. And there's a lot of science behind that says as much as 25 to 30% of your entire, release cycle revenue can come from the pre-release campaign. So if it's one single and drop the mixtape, or 4 singles and put out the album, what have you, typically what you want to do is look at what song can just wake up the base, right? Because again, if we were at this peak and now we're in this valley, you want to kind of warm up the algorithms again, right? Before you maybe put out your big focus single and really go for all of your playlisting. But once that first song and that second and that third are identified, you want to always have the, campaign ready assets in your back pocket for that second or third one before the first or the second one comes out. So you're ready to go, because it's very reactionary, as we've been saying, since that point.
Cool. More questions?
Hello. There was a mention of benchmarks, and Kristin, you highlighted how you seem to have a very nuanced science behind, like, this is reacting this much, that will open up a budget of X, that will, and then based on that initial budget, if it's reacting off of our first push, we will then invest more. I'm interested to know how you developed those, not just based on the digital marketing, but when we talk about hitting benchmarks in terms of what percentage of new followers of Spotify do you want to see? How many new Instagram followers do you want to see? If you're just seeing in general, 10% every week, over and over, and that's good. But when's that spike that tells you like something's really starting to happen, something's really reactive? Because it doesn't feel like there's an industry standard for that. That's kind of things are positive and moving forward, but there's not, I'm interested to know how you developed that on your side.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that it's it's a path of different experiences and seeing how others are doing it, and just picking up little lessons along the way, whether that be from Billboard streaming Twitter charts. Next Big Sound was definitely a big influence for me in terms of creating stages, which was a big focus on creating context. So context is king, and that is a driver in the how we create benchmarks behind why we make decisions. But I think just fundamentally, with what I was saying before, Drake's audience in Toronto is different than Drake's audience in Germany. The financial opportunity for that audience is different in different markets. So one of the primary reasons, and I know I'm kind of skirting around your direct question, but I feel like I'd answer it in a number of ways. But one of the reasons that because our job is to mitigate the label's budget to get the best bang for your buck by optimizing on that moment. And so we need to understand what the financial opportunity is for that artist based on stage, based on market, based on genre, because it dictates how the audience is going to respond. So whether it's benchmarks in terms of what we're trying to achieve, or benchmarks that they lay the foundation as to why we make these decisions, you just, context is king, and that's the basis of it.
I think Cameron was asking for your algorithm.
Just one thing to add to that too is, we are, as we explore this arena and we start creating fundamental bases on which we make decisions, we will be sharing that, because I think for far too long everyone is building the best mousetrap, and we actually want to share the way that we're thinking about things in order for other people to take that and make that their baseline, so there can be some standardization around how we're identifying spikes and how we're optimizing before and after a campaign. So more to come.
Do we have time for one more question? Okay, one more.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Dominique. My question is just in and around campaigns where you're seeing singles come back around and chart. And so looking, for example, at Lizzo, a couple of years after she put out her single, we saw her singles kind of chart and do really well. And so I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how you can create strategies in and around singles that are released, and how you can, capitalize on creating campaigns that get to that point. I don't know if that's a clear question, but I'm just trying to, understand a bit more about the data and how you would analyze a campaign that has come full 360 again and has kind of found success. And if you can talk a bit about strategies for that.
I don't think you can create the lightning in the bottle that are the biggest ones you witness, whether it's Fleetwood Mac on a skateboard or this Kate Bush moment with Stranger Things. Someone told me this stat, I think just a couple days ago, that up until that moment, that Kate Bush song did something like 320,000 song equivalents in its streaming existence since it was out before streaming. And just in the last 3 weeks, it's done 380,000. So that's just like winning a lottery ticket. How you can further capitalize on those types of moments, even if they are, much smaller than that, is just ensuring that you're resurfacing that song as if it is as new to the customer that's engaging with it now that it is, right? That entire audience that made that song fire out of a cannon, it's brand new to them, right? Do your best to make it look as fresh as possible. Sometimes that's new art. Sometimes that's redelivering it with an instrumental EP or a remix, eventually putting a feature on it if it makes sense like that. Reskinning your socials and your YouTube to really focus on the moment, so on and so forth. There's probably the best kind of standard best practice.
Well, I can add on that virality is virality, so that you just don't create virality, that's it. But most of the audience and views and revenues are usually like 70% or 80% is coming from catalog. So this is something that people usually forget. Is really about the latest release, which is it's important. I'm not saying it's not, but the mass of the catalog is what really makes a difference at the end of the day, because you could increase your audience and revenue. It might not be one song, it might be like dozens of songs at the same time by just doing very basic stuff. Just for example, if you're just uploading a custom thumbnail on a video that you didn't have 10 years ago, a thumbnail, basically, the bare minimum that I've seen in terms of growth rate is 10%. So if you have big numbers as an artist, 10% minimum, and I've seen up to 60%. So let's say you just bare minimum 10% on a good number of videos, that's real, like a real impact. So I would just really focus on a number of videos rather than one, because at the end of the day, one sounds really cool, but the mass of it is really where the numbers are. So and then you can build on that to both like create more audience there and then push the latest release. So that really works out like on a 360 approach. Definitely on YouTube, that really changes the numbers and the play.
Cool. All right, we're officially out of
Can we
time.
just
Yes,
just,
yes, go
just
for
one
it.
thing, because we are
Just
talking sorry, because we are talking about data, and we're happy at BuzzMyVideos to offer a complimentary YouTube audit to anyone that wants one. Just reach out to me, or like either here or during the conference, or just write me an email. It's paola@buzzmyvideos.com. I'm happy to give you more data, actionable data.
Actionable data. All right, thanks you guys for joining us for our data talk. We'll stick around for a little bit if people have more questions, but enjoy the rest of your Indie Week, and thanks for being with us today. Thank you so much.